Okay, so the first game we'll look at today is Mikito versus ericosman, with Mikito taking black and Eric taking white. So everything here looks pretty normal. Nothing too crazy. And this is definitely one of the variations you can play, but we've also in recent years seen G3 be pretty popular, where black will then play at D4 to protect the base for this black group. White will play here. Black will play a move to prevent white from sliding in at B5 himself. White will usually extend out over here to prevent being pincered, and then black will play here. And this is generally considered okay for both sides. White makes territory on the lower side, a little bit of a framework on the left side as well, and then black gets to solidify a good corner. So this is perfectly reasonable for both sides. But obviously Hane here at C2 is perfectly fine as well.
But there's also C4. Isn't that also common for white?
C4, the cut.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it super common, but it is playable. And it has to do a little bit has to do with the ladder move over here as well. So typically you'll see black play here, white plays here, black plays here, Atari, extend, and these are kind of a forced move sequence, which is why I'm not spending too much time on them. They're all kind of necessary in order after this move. They're all kind of necessary in order to force I space, or not I space, but liberties for these. Black plays here, white plays here, black plays here, black plays here. And then typically black will take sentai and play elsewhere. And this result's generally considered good for black because black has a nice high position over here and sentai. So we typically like this formation for black. So you don't see this move quite as often because I think it leads to a nice result for black.
Okay.
But it is playable on occasion. Although I will say this move is not as popular as just extending here. Even though the weakness over here still exists, I think the general idea though is that black can come out and white either fixes here and gets pressed down here, which is a little painful, or white can fix here and get pressed down here, which can be painful as well. Whereas if the stones were in a little bit of a different order, white plays here, black plays here, white extends, the worst that can happen is that white gets a little bit squeezed, but not the end of the world. Something like this might happen, and white doesn't get many points down here, but at the very least can build some sort of shape here, and black's shape is also not very good. So that's typically why you don't see the tiger mouth anymore, because you don't really like it when white gets pushed down at f3, or when black can eventually get this move at f3. Again, small things, but you will rarely see E2 nowadays. Black attaches, which is okay. Again, kind of going over this is more common. Just keeping white really low on the second line and letting black get a strong position. And the nice thing about this is that black just gets a strong position over here. If white plays away, then black gets a really nice attack on these two stones. So this is a perfectly reasonable way for black to play, although the attach is fine too. I think white's next move was definitely a mistake though. White should really be high on the outside. And the nice thing about this is it gives white this move at C6, which allows white to threaten the cut here. And so if black plays a move like this, white gets to build up this shape on the lower side while also putting pressure on these 5 or 6 stones in the center and building up a formation on this side. So it's going to be really hard for black to get a direct attack because of how weak this group is. And unfortunately, this group at the bottom is quite strong. So black would be in a not so great position here. In the game, white cut or tried to cut. Black ataried. White extends, and then black. I think in the game, black plays here, which was a mistake. Black should definitely Atari over here. The problem with playing here is that these two stones are not actually that important. White can give them up, and white can give them up and just make some points on this side. But the other part about that is it's not easy for black to really capture these stones either, right? Because if black plays here, then obviously these 2 white stones can come out. And if black Ataris this way, it's also not clear that this stones are captured either. It's going to be a ladder race. So it's going to be a little bit complicated no matter what. And so because of that, Black trying to separate these two stones from this group over here may not be the best idea. Much better for black to Atari here, white extends, come down, and try to kill these two stones. Black would play here, and now white would be able to play it elsewhere. And this would be an okay result for both sides. I think that white's position here is pretty okay, but not as good as the position had white just played here to begin with. So go back to the game variation real quick. Again, black's mistake at e5, white Atari's, black extends, plays here. And again, now it's a really difficult position for black because black doesn't know if it wants to Atari this way, or Atari this way, or even push this way. So there's a lot of choices here, but none of them are particularly good for black. So when black pushes here, now black has these two really weak groups to worry about, these two stones here and these 5 or so stones here, whereas white's group have a little bit more flexibility. So black hanes, white blocks, and black pushes through. Black tries to cut here. I don't think this is a particularly problematic move, but I think if I were black, I would probably just extend here. There is this cut that exists at D9, so we just need to be mindful of it. And the problem with this sequence, and it's kind of obvious after the fact, is that when black Atari is here, white could just attach, could not double Atari, but Atari, and then come back and capture these stones. And this would be definitely a good result for white because now white has gotten these center stones all connected up and these 5 black stones are super weak. So in the game though, I think what ended up happening was black Atari here, white took, and now black has a really strong position over here. And so even though white's gonna eventually capture these 5 stones, black has a stronger position on this side than it did before. And there's still some amount of endgame moves as well later on, some Aji that still exists. So not a terrible result, but I think a missed opportunity by not Atariing here first. Black box. So but at this point in the game, white is doing very well. It's going to be very difficult for black to come back. Unfortunately, this Hane doesn't really work. There's only 4 liberties here. And even though white on the outside only has 4 liberties, there's no way that black's going to be able to capture these stones on the outside before white captures these stones on the inside. So again, this is a really good fight for white. Yeah, I would say this jump is maybe a little bit questionable. Honestly, I would leave this group. I would just leave this group alone and just play over here. It's possible later on you can aim at moves like this, which might target a weakness here, and maybe put some pressure down. But by making these moves now, we lose a lot of the Aji that exists here. And so we're a little hesitant to play these moves now. We'd much rather wait for later and say, you know what, I know this doesn't work now, but it's possible it might work later. And then this jump is confusing to me because white could very easily just cut through here. So if I were black in this position, after this, I would probably just try to build up territory and force white to eventually come back and protect this. Something along these lines. Something like this might happen, and you can maybe later on you can come back and play over here and get some territory, or at least break up what white's getting over here. Long story short, though, letting these stones die is a little bit too premature. Black plays here, and then white makes a nice pincer, which both kills these 2 stones, protects these 4 stones, and also puts pressure on the stone. So again, white's playing really well here. Black is not really, hasn't really gained all that much. White touches on top. Yep, that's okay. I think in this case, I might attach on the outside as opposed to cutting on the inside. And the reason for that is this stone being high means that white cannot block here. Because if white blocks here, these 3 stones on the outside are going to be in some real danger. So white would have to play here, and now black gets a really nice corner. And white's shape on the outside is not that strong either. So this would be a really nice way to play. Black gets the corner territory, this group is perfectly fine, and black gets Sente. Um, by tarrying here, or by trying to push through here, you make this stone on the outside much weaker. And so even though white gets the corner, this stone is much weaker than it was before. And these stones are also not as strong as they were before. Um, and it has to do with the kind of the loss of liberties as well, right? Because there's all sorts of we've seen things like this before, where if white were to get a move here and black were to ignore this loss of liberties could be a real pain over here. So playing these extra moves to try to cut through when the cuts don't work can really hurt us a little bit. Does that point make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Um, I would be mindful also, when white plays at R3, black's going to have a little bit of trouble here because now there's a cut point on both at M2 and at O2. So because of that, I would be much more inclined to either play at M2 or extend one more at N3. Because again, I don't want to let white push through here.
But not R3. You wouldn't consider just playing R3 for black?
If you can play R3, but then white gets a nice little chunk of territory over here.
Right, but then that's not Sente though, right?
It's not Sente, but it's still large.
Okay.
It's still 15 plus points.
I guess a lot of times I think that at the beginning of the game, Sente is so valuable so that if black plays R3 and white plays N3, then black's happy because he gets Sente.
Well, if you play at N2 though, this is basically like Sente, right?
I see. So you do that once and then you switch
Yeah,
off.
and then you can switch off. Yeah, but I mean, even still playing something like this is still quite a large move. So
Oh,
I
I
don't
see
want.
what you mean because the N3 is doing two things. It's building black and decreasing white, so
Yeah,
it's more valuable than just in building black, which is what R3 would do.
yeah.
Okay.
But again,
Makes sense.
I will say like this area is only going to be black's territory, whereas this area could be either's territory. Does that make
Uh-huh.
sense?
Okay.
So for that reason, that's kind of why I'm focusing more on this side than I am on the corner, even
Right.
though
All
the
right.
corner is generally considered larger.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So this M4 is a little bit of a missed opportunity. And I would say that K3 is also a little bit slow. I'd be much more inclined to play a move elsewhere. Even if black plays here, it's not that big a deal. There's no real cuts that are going to be particularly problematic. You can just give up the one. Oops, excuse me. You can give up the one stone and be perfectly okay. And so even though black gets some territory here, you've gotten 3 moves elsewhere, and I think this is very clearly a better result for white. And then let's see. So this move by black is fine, totally okay. Typically, you might see a large knight's move to try to reduce a really strong position. And the reason why you don't necessarily see this type of the middle line move is because now white can invade and try to use the strength of this group to attack these 2 stones. So large knight's move is often a nice way of reducing a large framework while not necessarily leading yourself to get attacked or inviting yourself to get attacked. This is still not a small move necessarily, but I don't think you need to play it right now. I think it's fine to just play elsewhere. Black's not going to really want to spend a move over here right now anyway. This is a little bit too small. So for that reason, you can probably play yourself elsewhere. And this move at R3, I think will be your right to play at any time later on as well. Yeah, so like these are by and large a little bit of small exchanges. So again, black now takes a large framework. So even though territory-wise, white's done quite well over here, kill these stones, black's not really that far behind because it's built out a large framework for itself over here.
Yeah, this is where I felt as white I was, as you say, I was doing well at the beginning, but this is where I felt I started to lose control of the game. I suddenly saw this huge black rest of the board and thought, oh my gosh, what do I do?
Yeah, and I think part of it has to do with, not realizing that this is your influence. You don't use it to make territory, right? And that's kind of what you did here. What you want to do is you want to use it to attack.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where your thought should be at the Q14 type move or something like that. And I think you saw here, but and this was probably the start of the start of the issues you ran into was this is the only area on the board where I would consider black strong, and this is the area you decided to attack, right?
Yeah, because I was using some principle I thought I'd heard of. Well, the best time to invade is when one more move would sew it up as territory. Then that's a good time to invade. But maybe that's not the place to apply that principle here.
Maybe, yeah. The real problem is though, again, this is the only area that black's strong. So why would you play in the area that black's strong? You'd want to play where black is weak. And so I would think, okay, well, these two stones are weak, right? Or even just a 3-3 invasion might also be perfectly fine. If you take away this territory for black, black's not going to have enough points.
Yeah. Okay.
And so now you were trying to attack, but you're the attackee.
Right. Right.
And also, this move it's kind of hard to evaluate because it's obvious that you're trying to aim at the cutting point. But what if black just gave it up? Right? You know, is this area worth all that much territory? Not a ton. It's worth maybe just a few stones. But I would say this area is
Well, that
worth
doesn't
certainly
even work
more.
anyway. That cut doesn't work because 5 can be played at E9, right?
It gets a little
Oh, I
complicated.
see. I see. It's a little strange.
Well, no, actually, it doesn't work. It's fine. But yeah, 5 could be played at E9 as well. So maybe black has to play here, but still, you know, again, you run into this issue of this territory is much bigger than this territory over here.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So black connecting here might have been a little slow. Maybe just a counter attack might be nice. And then black, you know, white kind of, if I were white here, again, just play like a really light move and just make it so that these stones are going to be unassailable, and I think you'll be okay. You know, I think if between this huge lower left territory you've gotten and the territory you've gotten on the right side, as long as these stones don't die, I think you're going to be fine. So even if black plays something like this,
Yeah, I can't even remember what I did because it was like a week ago.
yeah, you tried to live locally, which I think was maybe the problem.
Oh, okay.
And even this is still a good fight for you. You separated out these groups. You know, you're still doing perfectly fine here. But you know, I will say the attack you're making here, if this doesn't work, you haven't gained anything.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
black is very distinctly mapping out the top territory. So just be mindful of when you're attacking, like, what am I gaining? Is there an actual benefit to it? You know, maybe a couple moves here that could or could be played later. Doesn't matter too much. But you know, again, if you're not killing this group, these black stones here, then you've gained nothing, and you just have
Yeah,
a weak
because
group
black
that's
just
floating on the
built this
board.
huge thing at the upper left
Yeah,
that used to be invadable and now it's not.
yeah. And I will say there's still, you know, the problem is like this seems like the right move, right? This type of cutting move, because you're like, okay, well, great, I'll play this, and you know, black will be cut off. But the problem is you have a shortage of liberties here, because if you try to cut the stone, then black will capture. So you can't even really successfully
Yeah.
cut these
Yeah.
stones off because of the weaknesses down here. So with that in mind, black's able to run out. And black's has destroyed any sort of mapping,
Yeah,
you know,
I think I
framework of
often
territory here.
attack too early.
Yeah. Black's destroyed any framework you had down here and also building out a framework for itself up top. This may be a little bit of a questionable move. You know, you don't want to make white stronger here because that gives white the opportunity to make more eye space. So if I were white, if I were black, I'd be inclined to maybe play something like this and build up my framework over here and keep the pressure on these white stones to not build up eye space. Or black could jump out as well. This is kind of a thank you move. Oops, excuse me. It's not really helping the eye shape of this black group down here all that much, and you know, white
But what
white
was
does
that
have a
move you
better shape.
thought black could play instead of K10?
Maybe something like this.
Yeah. So the thing is that if black does that, isn't white going to do something like M9? I think that's what I'd be worried about. I think if I did that black move.
Yeah, but I think you'll be okay with living here. I don't think you should have too much trouble.
It looks scary.
I think there's probably enough eye space down here where you'll be okay. And you also have at least, you know, potentially an eye down here as well. But But if you're afraid of that, then just jump out here yourself, right? No
Yeah,
need to
that
exchange.
makes more
No
sense
need
to
to
me.
exchange this move first.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Want to be a little mindful of time. Yeah, at this point, it just I think Eric, you got a little too aggressive in a fight that you were ahead on the board, and you could have just kept it very simple by just playing a couple 3-3s. I think that at this point, if you just kind of played a 3-3 here or a 3-3 here, you would have had enough territory to close out the game without too much issue.
Yeah,
Um,
so I guess that's where counting becomes really important
yeah,
because it looks like black has this huge influence on the whole board up there. So to make a statement like, "Oh, you invaded the 3-3, you have enough to win," I have to do some counting. It may be obvious to you that invading at the 3-3 leads to white having enough to win. It's not obvious to me. Maybe you
yeah.
can spend just a minute showing how you do the rough counting to be able to be confident about what you're saying when you make this.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, let's take a look at white's territory down here. So 5, 10. So there's 7 or 8 dead stones. So we'll count that as 15 plus the actual stones. So that's 10, another 15. So there's roughly about 40 or so points down here for white, maybe a little bit more, maybe closer to 45, and maybe another 10 or so here. So I count roughly 55 for white, maybe a couple extra points for Comey. I would say white has roughly the 60, 65 range, right? Um, Now, black really doesn't have much of anything yet. It has mapped out an area that's quite large, but the problem is if you were to get the 3-3 here and the 3-3 here, black's only territory would be, the points over here and the points over here, right? So black is maybe 30, maybe 20, 25 points here, 20, 25 points here. Whereas after these variations, I'm just choosing a very simple variation. Not saying this is how it happened, but kind of the simple variations. After these
Yeah, didn't
variations,
you tell us that black should play 8 at 9?
I'm just,
Or am I
just doing
confusing it with another
no,
position?
I'm just doing simple variations for the counting. I don't want to get too in depth,
Oh,
but white gets 10 points here, 10 points here, and now black's only territory is this area here. Now, the problem is this territory is not going to be 100 points. This territory is going to be 50, 60 points. And so when you count that white had 65 before these two 10 pointers, it's going to be pretty simple to see, okay, well, if black's only going to get about 60 points here and white gets 10 more points here, 10 more points here, white's going to be ahead.
so how do you count 60 for black here? How do you do
I
that?
don't, whenever something's this open in the center, I generally only count the sides. So I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So maybe 20 points here. And I'll
Yeah.
probably do the same over here. So another 20 points, so 40. And then I'm a little generous. I'll add maybe another 10 or 15 points. But the problem is it's so hard for white to get, or for black to get that territory because all white needs to do is invade once.
I see. I see. Okay.
Right? So, it's all estimates, but I think that, when you're estimating yourself as 10, 15 points ahead, it's probably safe to play a little bit cautious.